Hey everybody, hope you're all doing well. My name is Steven and this is the Storytime channel. Today we have some malicious compliance stories, and our first story of the day is by Garmstrong318. I have to meet with the area manager to explain why I missed the target. Sure thing. To set the scene, I used to work for a phone network in the UK in the late 90s as a shop salesman. The company had a problem with declining sales as they thought themselves better than others and people would pay the privilege of being with them. Well, the public didn't, and it showed. Of course, that office couldn't comprehend this, and along with a string of draconian measures, they insisted that if you missed any one of your 21 key targets each month, you had to travel to wherever your area manager was and explain in person why you failed and how you will correct this for next month. And if you didn't, they started disciplinary proceedings. I and a lot of other staff realized the colossal mistake they made in wording. First off, we could choose when to travel to them, and the company had to, by law, pay for it. They even said they would pay for travel and other expenses in the announcement and linked to the government website stating it. Cue the maliciousness. I had actually taken a new role in a different industry and was on my 3-month notice. And this new policy came into effect in the first of the 3 months, and I missed one of my targets for amount of accessories sold by 2%. So I got the summons to see the area manager. I had been informed that there was a meeting of area managers to be held in Inverness, the far north of Scotland, in 2 weeks, so I scheduled my meeting with him accordingly. Now, I lived and worked near the other end of the country, in England, so I used the company system to book my travel, and due to the journey times, 9 hours to get there, I had to book a hotel for 2 nights. I also opted to pay the optional £50 to upgrade all my bookings, first-class rail ticket and a 4-star hotel, instead of a welcome break or other budget option. So on the Monday I traveled up, stayed overnight. Tuesday afternoon held my 15-minute meeting, which went like this. Area manager says, "So why are you here?" I say I missed my target for sales of accessories by 2%. "How do you plan to correct this so we don't have to start a formal disciplinary?" I don't. "I beg your pardon?" I have no intention of making a huge effort to sell £4 more stuff. I officially leave the company in 3 weeks' time. Area manager turning red with anger. "What the heck are you doing here then? Why have you even bothered?" Well, you see, I need a good reference, so I'm following all the rules. I'll end it here, but you get the image. I also showed him how much they paid to send me up there. Train tickets, first class both way, close to £800, and the hotel was around $400 for 2 nights. Remember, I used the optional upgrade system and paid £50 in total for the upgrades on the system. So they spent close to £1,150 to send me most of the way up the country to tell the manager I was leaving. Oh, and they also paid me for 3 full days' work to attend this meeting. Again, as they said it was on company time, so we got paid. Due to the location, I would need to travel up Monday, attend the meeting on Tuesday afternoon, his only free slot, and then get the train Wednesday back home. I also know from speaking to other friends I worked with that they also did similar tricks, and it basically cost them tens of thousands of pounds to send staff here, there, and everywhere to these meetings. It also caused a huge turnover in staff who had just had enough with all the garbage. I heard around 3 months after I left, they stopped doing this as the cost was astronomical. Plus, the amount of staff downtime was also astronomical. The company has slowly learned their lesson, mainly through replacing most of the top brass with people who have a clear idea of what they are doing. But yeah, that was the best trip I ever had to Scotland. Could you imagine any company spending $1,150 to explain why you didn't sell 4? If you could have a meeting with your area manager anywhere in the world, where would you want to go? Let me know in the comments down below. I would definitely want to go somewhere scenic. Our next story is by SnooDonuts2339. Take away our trampoline, here's every single safety violation I've found. So we live in a communal block of flats by the council. We're lucky to be surrounded by a fair chunk of grass and enclosed off from any roads. At the semi-beginning of lockdown, we bought a second-hand trampoline off of Facebook as our kid has some health issues that I won't go into and we were worried about his progress. So he has it for about a month before we get slapped with a notice from the council saying we have 2 weeks to remove it for safety violations. So I bring up the council lady and say about his condition and how this is great for his mental health, etc. She doesn't care in the slightest, keeps giving the robot response of, "We can't have it as it's a safety hazard, etc., etc." We didn't know when we got it that we weren't allowed it, but we hid it in such a way between big bushes and trees that you wouldn't know it was there unless you went looking for it. So this lady says it was reported by a neighbor and that's why they know about it. There was no way of getting around it, we had to get rid of it. So I sent her a very long list of safety hazards that I'd found, from other people's garden furniture to loose bricks and paths, loose handrails, no fire safety, trees falling down in storms, and owners with aggressive dogs, etc. Must have been 50 odd hazards. She had to reply to every single one. Also, I managed to sell the trampoline for more than I paid for it. Downside, they stole one of the bins. Yeah, it's definitely disappointing to get something that's really meant for helping your child with developmental stuff and mental health issues, just to be told that, oh, well, you can't have this and I don't actually give a crap at all about your son's condition. It's definitely a little bit satisfying to know that in revenge, the lady had to email or file or do some kind of work for 50 odd various hazards that are legitimate hazards as according to the rules. Our next story is by Dizzy Improvement 32. Work the overnight before holiday starts? Sure thing. Disclaimer, not my story but a coworker's. We worked at a fast food chain together that stayed open 24 hours. If you were unlucky enough to get an overnight, you start at 11 p.m. and finish at 8 a.m. If you are unlucky enough to get the overnights, you're almost guaranteed to be unlucky enough to work one day before your holiday, meaning you technically work 8 hours on your first day of holiday. My friend had requested their holiday in advance and stated on the request that they had a plane flight that very day so they could not do an overnight shift the night before. The scheduling manager didn't care, so they scheduled them on an overnight anyway. Friend was angry, asked them again to change it, and they refused. Friend then clarified their holiday began on that day, to which the manager said yes. Friend then showed up for his overnight, completed 1 hour, and clocked off at exactly midnight. When asked why they were walking off their shift, he informed the manager that today was officially his holiday, so he didn't have to work, left the store, and went on vacation as planned. Surprisingly, they didn't argue with him on it, though they weren't pleased. They tried to look at issuing a warning, but had to settle with a stern, "Please tell us next time and we'll sort out the problem," when he got back. I am pleased to say that they are a little more cautious about giving people an overnight before their holiday time, though. I love how they go and say, "Please tell us next time and we'll sort out the problem," as if OP's coworker didn't do just that. They said that the friend was angry and asked them again to change it, and they refused. What more can the friend do? If I didn't care enough about the job, I'd probably do the same thing too. This next story is by VloekenenVentileren. I have to wrap my textbooks? Alright, I'll do what you say. Since you guys like my last post about my school antics, have another one. I came from a pretty crap home situation. My parents were abusive. As a result, I acted out a lot. Often because I just felt like crap, but also a lot because I wasn't able to communicate clearly that I didn't have the same resources as most kids, and acting out was easier than telling adults what was happening at home. When I turned 14, my parents placed me in boarding school, where I spent 1 year before getting placed in state care. Just to point out how crap home really was. Boarding school meant a new, school. So I started my year and got my textbooks. In Belgium, the general rule is that you need to cover your textbooks with wrapping paper, as you are just loaning them for the year. I was a clumsy kid and I had no idea how to do this. Taking all my books home would mean towing about 25 kilograms of books on the train and bus. And even if I was able to do that, my mom would refuse to do it, as our relationship had worsened to a point where just seeing each other on the weekends means abuse. Even if I wanted to try it myself, I didn't have the money for the wrapping paper. I, being a terribly shy and sad/tired kid, had no idea how to address this, so I did what every kid would do. I just ignored it and carried my textbooks around bare. Problem solved. Now, at the same time, I was putting on a tough guy act at school, mainly because puberty makes you act dumb when feeling bad. I started skipping school a lot, mainly every day at noon when the bars opened up. Morning at school, I'd spend sleeping and or reading a free newspaper and books. I have no interest in learning most days. I would try to look like I was paying attention in class, as getting a note from the teacher in my journal would result in a light scolding at the boarding school, but would mean serious trouble at home on the weekends. Fun fact, I stole a second journal from a supply closet some weeks later and used that to show at home and started forging my parents' signature in my actual journal. That saved me a lot of trouble. Some days though, I just couldn't be bothered and would just read a free newspaper instead of following class. This would result in trouble, of course. One said teacher, who I didn't get along with at all, was handing it to me for reading the paper but also noticed that my textbooks were bare. He decided that was worth a note in my journal and kept adding notes throughout the week for either reading the paper but specifically for having bare textbooks. Now, I could stop reading the paper, but I didn't know what to do with the textbooks. For him, it was just a note, but I knew that every note he kept adding would spell certain disaster at home. Since he gave one of my main subjects, I couldn't avoid him. Being the awkward kid that I was, I didn't do anything for 2 weeks. Again, I didn't know where to turn and couldn't explain to anyone what was going on. A decade later, I still feel horrible about how a stupid book that wouldn't even come close to my parents could have such repercussions during the weekends. I was also really mad at said teacher for doing all this to me, even though he couldn't know what he'd unleashed by a stupid teacher's note. So I really wanted to show him up. Anyway, after those 2 terrible weekends, I had to do something, but I had no idea what. Contemplating life and textbooks at boarding school, I noticed I had a small stack of the free newspapers I would read in class. Cue lightbulb moment. School rulebook said nothing about what material you had to use to cover the textbooks, so I got crafting, something I still hate with a passion. The end result were some textbooks covered with newspaper in the most horrible fashion. Wonky corners, miles of tape, tears, the whole lot. It looked horrible, and I was so happy with it. Anyway, next lesson from said teacher, he saw what I had done. Asked what that was. I told him I covered my textbooks like he said I should do. He told me I couldn't do it with newspaper. I said nothing in the school rules prevented me from doing this. Told him to look it up. That got me a teacher's note, as well as the fact that I made it a point not to pay attention in class but read the bloody articles on my book covers. At that point, I just wanted to rub it in and didn't care that it got me in extra trouble. But I did reach my end goal, being that the teacher stopped caring about my textbooks, even though the newspaper started to wear and tear even more in the weeks that followed. It didn't put a stop to my home situation. In general, that whole year was horrible, and I'm glad to be better off now. But a small act of malicious compliance meant I could show it to the adults and feel like I had won at least one battle in the war. And that meant a whole lot at the time. Trouble also brings opportunity, and I'm lucky enough to think that said period in my life also taught me a lot of things that benefit me in life right now, like critical thinking, self-reliance, and showing it to the man without getting in huge trouble by making use of flawed systems and loopholes. I'm lucky enough to be working with special needs adults right now as a social worker. Nothing excites me more than finding such loopholes and getting my residents stuff like wheelchairs or certain benefits at times they shouldn't be eligible. I'm 32 now, but I still feel like that 14-year-old that likes to stick it to the system. Hope it never changes. It's a sad story, but it's also a beautiful one in the sense that it really was a look into how OP was able to capture that very, very important sense of self-worth and kind of a self-awakening of sorts. I'm really glad that in the end, OP was able to go on and do stuff that makes them feel very fulfilled and also allows them to do things that, as a 14-year-old, made them feel extremely fulfilled and proud of themselves. And our final story of the day is by Vlad666. No one's allowed in the office without a manager being present. Okay. Prior to my retirement, I'm working a retail job with a quasi-state agency that controls retail stores in my state. In our old store, we had a buzzer at each register that rang in the warehouse in case we needed help, or a customer needed a case of something. Then the powers that be decided to move us to a new, bigger store. Of course, this being a state operation, while the store is much bigger, the staff is exactly the same. we now have 4 times the warehouse, 4 times the retail space, and the same number of people and hours. Everything is always, you need to do more with less. I got sick of this and I'm a vindictive SOB by nature. I've been called the Iceman because I can ignore anything. So if I was on register, I stayed at the register until I was told to do something else. The managers were not happy. Then they started playing a game. One of the 2 managers on the shift would go back into the warehouse to check things, aka vape. Vaping is not allowed in the stores. In short order, the other manager would join the first, and then the other 2 clerks would head to the warehouse, leaving me alone in the store. Now, at this new store, the powers that be had the buzzer to call the warehouse placed in the office instead of at the registers. Managers put out a memo stating that employees are not allowed in the office without a manager present. So, clue in malicious compliance. I keep ringing up customers and other customers come to me asking for products that are in the locked display cases. I inform them that they need to stick their heads in the door at the rear of the store and call for a manager. A manager comes out, talks to the customer, and goes to the office to look for the keys. Then has to go back to the warehouse to get the keys off the other manager. Customers are not happy, and I proceed to tell the customers complain to the state complaint office. The managers go ballistic demanding to know why I didn't ring the buzzer, and I simply point out that their memo says I'm not allowed in the office without a manager present. Bottom line, there wasn't a thing they could do about it. Yeah, if they're going to be bad managers and make some really dumb rules and whatnot, I think it's pretty understandable if the employees do some kinda dummy stuff to just kind of blatantly expose how bad the managers are being overall. I'd be really interested to hear if that state complaint office OP talked about ever paid a visit or an investigation. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So if you enjoyed the stories today, let me know which one was your personal favorite and why in the comments down below. And if you haven't yet, please like this video and subscribe and turn notifications on because anything you do helps this channel grow so much more. So no matter what you do, whether it was just watching the video, liking, subscribing, thank you all so very much for supporting me right here on the Storytime channel. I hope you all have a wonderful day and I'll see you all next time right here.